3 weeks ago, I was standing in line at a grocery store feeling completely broken inside. A woman behind me, someone I'd never seen before, tapped my shoulder and said, "Whatever you're going through right now, it's going to make sense soon." She paid for her items and disappeared. I never saw her again, but her words changed everything. If something like this has ever happened to you, this message will explain what's really going on. You see, I wasn't just having a bad day. I was in the middle of what felt like the darkest season of my life. Everything I'd worked for was crumbling. Relationships were falling apart. Dreams were dying. And I was questioning everything I thought I knew about God, about life, about my purpose. But that stranger, that woman I'll never see again, spoke words that my soul had been desperate to hear for months. She had no idea what I was going through. She couldn't have known the specific struggles I was facing. Yet somehow, her words hit the exact center of my need. And that's when I began to realize something profound. God doesn't always speak through grand revelations or burning bushes. Sometimes He whispers through the lips of strangers who don't even know they're being used as His messengers. If you've ever had a similar experience, if a complete stranger has ever said something that felt like it was meant specifically for you, then what I'm about to share will revolutionize how you see the divine interactions happening around you every single day. Stay with me, because by the end of this message, you're going to understand the 7 ways God uses strangers as His secret messengers. And more importantly, you're going to learn how to recognize these divine appointments so you never miss another message meant for your soul. There's an invisible network operating all around us, and most people never realize they're part of it. It's a network of ordinary people who, at seemingly random moments, become carriers of divine messages. They don't know they're being used this way. They often don't even remember what they said 5 minutes after they said it. But they're part of God's intricate system of reaching souls who need to hear from heaven. This network isn't limited by denomination, religion, or belief system. God uses believers and non-believers alike. He speaks through children who say profound things without understanding their depth. He uses elderly people who share wisdom they didn't even know they possessed. He works through busy professionals who pause their rushed lives to offer words of encouragement to strangers. I want you to think about your own life for a moment. How many times has a stranger said something to you that felt significant? How many times have you walked away from a brief encounter with someone thinking, that was exactly what I needed to hear? These weren't accidents. These weren't coincidences. These were divine appointments orchestrated by a God who loves you enough to speak to you through the most unexpected messengers. But here's what's even more remarkable. You've probably been used as one of these messengers yourself without even realizing it. That time you felt compelled to compliment a stranger who looked sad. That moment when you inexplicably shared an encouraging word with someone in an elevator. That day, when you found yourself offering advice to someone you just met, you were being used by God to deliver a message that person desperately needed to hear. The reason most people miss these divine interactions is that we've been conditioned to expect God to speak in spectacular ways. We're looking for miracles that make headlines, but we're missing the everyday miracles happening in coffee shops, grocery stores, and subway platforms around the world. God's favorite hiding place isn't in grand cathedrals or mountaintop experiences. It's in the ordinary moments of human connection, in the brief encounters between strangers who will never see each other again, but who exchange words that echo in their hearts for years to come. This underground network of divine messengers is always active, always operating, always looking for souls who are ready to receive what heaven wants to communicate. The question isn't whether God is speaking through strangers. The question is whether you're listening. Not every interaction with a stranger carries a divine message. But divine encounters have distinct characteristics that set them apart from ordinary conversations. Once you understand these patterns, you'll begin to recognize these sacred moments as they happen. The setup: divine encounters rarely happen when you're expecting them. They occur when you're vulnerable, distracted, or emotionally open. You might be going through a crisis, feeling lonely, questioning your decisions, or simply having a moment of deep reflection. It's as if God waits for these moments when your spiritual receptors are most sensitive. The messenger. The person delivering the message is almost always someone you've never met and will likely never see again. This anonymity is crucial because it removes any agenda or bias from the interaction. When a stranger speaks truth into your life, you can't dismiss their words as manipulation or people-pleasing. They have nothing to gain from saying what they say. The message, the words spoken, are rarely profound in a conventional sense. They're not usually biblical quotes or spiritual platitudes. Instead, they're simple human words that somehow pierce through to the exact place in your soul that needs healing, encouragement, or direction. The power isn't in the sophistication of the message. It's in the perfect timing and relevance to your situation. The delivery. The messenger often seems surprised by their own words. They might pause mid-sentence as if they didn't expect to say what they just said. Sometimes they'll even apologize or look confused, not understanding why they felt compelled to speak. This bewilderment is often a sign that they're being used as a vessel for something beyond their conscious intention. The impact. The message hits you differently than ordinary conversation. There's a quality of recognition, as if your soul is saying, "Yes, this is what I needed to hear." You might get chills, feel emotional, or experience a sudden shift in perspective. The words continue to resonate long after the encounter ends. The disappearance. The messenger typically exits your life as quickly as they entered it. They finish their shopping, get off at their stop, or return to their table. There's no follow-up, no relationship building, no expectation of gratitude. They've delivered their message and moved on, often without realizing they've been part of something sacred. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this anatomy. Jessica was sitting alone in a hospital waiting room, terrified about her mother's surgery. She'd been praying, but felt like her prayers were bouncing off the ceiling. An elderly man sat down next to her and, without any preamble, said, "Your mother is going to be fine, and this experience is going to make your family stronger than it's ever been." Jessica looked at him, shocked. She hadn't told him anything about her situation. Before she could respond, he smiled, patted her hand, and said, "Sometimes I just know things. Don't ask me how." A nurse called his name moments later, and he disappeared into the hospital corridors. Jessica's mother not only survived the surgery, but made a complete recovery. And the experience did exactly what the stranger predicted. It brought Jessica's scattered family together in ways they'd never experienced before. To this day, she has no idea who that man was, but his words carried her through the darkest hours of her life. Through years of collecting these stories and experiencing these encounters myself, I've identified 7 distinct types of messages that God commonly delivers through strangers. Understanding these categories will help you recognize these divine communications when they happen to you. Type 1. Messages of encouragement. These are words that lift your spirit when you're feeling defeated, discouraged, or ready to give up. The stranger has no knowledge of your struggles, yet they speak directly to your need for encouragement. Marcus was about to drop out of college, convinced he wasn't smart enough to succeed. Standing in line at the campus bookstore, the person behind him, someone he'd never seen before, looked at his textbooks and said, "You know, I can tell you're going to be really successful, You have this energy about you that says you don't give up easily." Those words gave Marcus the strength to finish his degree. He graduated with honors and now runs a successful nonprofit. Type 2. Messages of warning or protection. Sometimes God uses strangers to warn you away from dangerous situations or decisions. These messages often come as strong, intuitive feelings that the stranger feels compelled to share, even when it seems inappropriate or random. Sarah was about to sign a lease on an apartment that seemed perfect. While viewing the property, a woman walking her dog stopped and said, "I don't usually do this, but I feel like I need to tell you, this neighborhood isn't safe at night. There have been several incidents in the past few months that didn't make the news." Sarah decided to keep looking and later discovered that the woman was right. That seemingly random warning protected her from a potentially dangerous living situation. Type 3. Messages of confirmation. These messages come when you're uncertain about a decision and need confirmation that you're on the right path. A stranger will say something that validates the choice you've been hesitating to make. David had been offered a job in another state but was terrified to leave his hometown. At a coffee shop struggling with the decision, a stranger at the next table overheard him on a phone call and said, "Sorry for eavesdropping, but it sounds like you're facing a big move. I moved across the country 5 years ago, and it was the best decision I ever made. Sometimes you have to leap to learn you can fly." David took the job, and it led to opportunities he never could have imagined. Type 4. Messages of comfort. These come during times of grief, loss, or emotional pain. The stranger somehow knows exactly what to say to bring comfort to your hurting heart. After losing her newborn baby, Claire was struggling with overwhelming grief and guilt. At the grocery store, a woman she'd never met approached her and said, "I know this might sound strange, but I feel like I'm supposed to tell you that your baby is safe and loved, and you're going to be okay. I lost a child too, and I wish someone had told me that in those early days." Claire had never met this woman before or after, but those words began her healing process. Type 5. Messages of calling or purpose. Sometimes God uses strangers to speak to your destiny, to call out gifts and purposes you haven't recognized in yourself. Emma had always felt drawn to social work, but convinced herself it wasn't practical. While volunteering at a homeless shelter, a woman receiving services looked at her and said, "You have a gift for this. You see people, really see them. Don't waste that gift in an office somewhere." Emma changed her major the following week and now runs a program that's helped thousands of people transition out of homelessness. Type 6. Messages of hope. These messages come during your darkest seasons, when hope feels impossible. A stranger speaks words that reignite your faith in the future. James was battling severe depression and had lost all hope for his future. Sitting alone in a park, contemplating ending his life, a jogger stopped and said, "I know we don't know each other, but I felt like I needed to tell you, whatever you're going through, it's temporary. I can see strength in you that you probably can't see right now. Tomorrow is going to look different than today." That stranger's words gave James the strength to seek help and begin his journey toward healing. Type 7. Messages of love and acceptance. Perhaps the most powerful messages are those that communicate God's unconditional love through a stranger who has no reason to care about you, but somehow does. After struggling with addiction and feeling completely worthless, Tony was sitting outside a treatment center, afraid to go inside. A woman walking by stopped and said, "I don't know your story, but I want you to know that you matter. You're loved more than you realize, and it's never too late to start over." She handed him a flower from her bouquet and walked away. Tony entered the treatment center that day and has been sober for 3 years. You might wonder why God doesn't just speak to you directly, or why He doesn't use people who already know and love you to deliver His messages. There are profound reasons why strangers make the most effective divine messengers. Strangers have no agenda. When someone who knows you well gives you advice, you automatically filter their words through your knowledge of their personality, their biases, their relationship with you. You might think, they're just being nice, or they don't really understand my situation. But when a stranger speaks truth into your life, you can't dismiss their words as easily because they have no reason to lie to you or manipulate you. Anonymity creates authenticity. Because you'll likely never see this person again, there's no social pressure on either side. They don't need to maintain a relationship with you, and you don't need to reciprocate or feel obligated. This creates space for pure, authentic communication without the complications of ongoing social dynamics. Strangers bypass your defenses. We often have emotional walls built up against the people closest to us. Family members, friends, and colleagues might struggle to reach us because we've learned to tune them out, or because past conflicts have created barriers. Strangers slip past these defenses because we have no history with them to color our reception of their words. Divine surprise factor. When God speaks through someone unexpected, it gets your attention in a way that familiar voices might not. The surprise element makes you more likely to remember the encounter and continue reflecting on the message long after it's delivered. Universal accessibility. God's network of stranger messengers is everywhere, available 24/7, regardless of your location or circumstances. You might be traveling in a foreign country, isolated from your usual support system, but God can still reach you through a local shopkeeper, a fellow traveler, or someone sitting next to you on public transportation. Removes human credit. When God uses strangers to deliver messages, it's harder for human pride or hero worship to interfere with the pure reception of divine communication. The messenger disappears, leaving you alone with God and His message to you. Creates faith-building moments. These encounters require you to recognize God's hand in ordinary circumstances. This strengthens your faith and trains you to see divine activity in everyday life, which enriches your spiritual awareness overall. Demonstrates God's omnipresence. When God speaks through strangers, it reinforces the truth that He's everywhere, working through anyone at any time. It expands your understanding of how vast and creative His love for you really is. Not every word spoken by a stranger carries divine significance, but certain markers can help you distinguish between ordinary conversation and messages from heaven. Learning to recognize these signs will help you receive the communications God is sending your way. The message addresses a specific need. Divine messages through strangers almost always speak directly to something you've been praying about, worrying about, or struggling with. The relevance is too precise to be coincidental. The timing is perfect. These messages come exactly when you need to hear them. Not a day earlier when you wouldn't have been ready to receive them, and not a day later when they might have lost their impact. The words create inner resonance. When you hear a divine message through a stranger, something inside you vibrates with recognition. It's as if your soul is saying, "Yes, this is true. This is what I needed to know." You feel emotional response. Divine messages often trigger emotions, relief, hope, peace, or even tears. This emotional response is your spirit recognizing truth and comfort from heaven. The message contradicts negative thoughts. If you've been listening to lies about yourself, your situation, or your future, divine messages through strangers often directly contradict these negative narratives with truth and hope. The messenger seems surprised. Often people delivering divine messages appear startled by their own words. They might say things like, "I don't know why I said that," or "That just came out of nowhere." This bewilderment is often a sign that they're being used as a divine vessel. The encounter feels significant. While the interaction might be brief, it carries weight. You find yourself thinking about it repeatedly, sharing it with others, or returning to those words during difficult moments. The message aligns with spiritual truth. Divine messages through strangers will never contradict core spiritual principles like love, forgiveness, hope, and truth. They build up rather than tear down, encourage rather than condemn. Here's something that might surprise you. You've almost certainly been used as God's messenger to strangers, probably more often than you realize. Every time you felt compelled to encourage someone you don't know, offer help to a struggling stranger, or share a word of hope with someone having a difficult day, you've been part of God's underground network of divine messengers. But once you understand how this system works, you can become more intentional about making yourself available as a vessel for God's messages to others. Here's how to position yourself as an active participant in this divine network. Cultivate sensitivity to God's voice. The more attuned you become to hearing God's guidance in your own life, the more likely you are to recognize when He's prompting you to speak to someone else. This sensitivity develops through prayer, meditation, and regular spiritual practice. Pay attention to promptings. When you feel an unexpected urge to speak to a stranger, don't dismiss it as random impulse. God often communicates through gentle promptings, sudden thoughts, or feelings of compassion towards someone you don't know. Be willing to look foolish. Sometimes being God's messenger requires stepping outside your comfort zone. You might need to approach someone who looks sad, offer encouragement to someone who seems stressed, or share hope with someone who appears defeated. Your willingness to risk looking silly or being rejected creates space for God to work through you. Speak from love, not judgment. Divine messages are always delivered with love, even when they contain correction or warning. If you feel prompted to speak to a stranger, make sure your words come from a place of genuine care rather than judgment or superiority. Trust the impact even if you don't see it. You might never know how God used your words in someone's life. The person might not respond in the moment, or they might seem unaffected by what you said. Trust that if God prompted you to speak, your obedience has value regardless of the visible outcome. Keep it simple. Divine messages through strangers are usually simple, heartfelt communications rather than complex theological explanations. A simple "you're going to be okay" or "don't give up" might be exactly what someone's soul needs to hear. Don't overthink it. If you feel prompted to encourage someone, don't spend too much time analyzing whether the feeling is from God or crafting the perfect words. Often the most powerful messages are spontaneous expressions of genuine care and encouragement. Let me share a story about how this works in practice. Michael was rushing through the airport, stressed about missing his connection, when he saw a young woman crying near his gate. He felt a strong urge to comfort her, but almost ignored it because he was focused on his own problems. Finally, he approached her and simply said, "I don't know what's wrong, but whatever it is, you're stronger than you think you are." The woman looked up, surprised, and said, "Thank you. I really needed to hear that." Michael caught his flight and forgot about the encounter until 6 months later, when he received a letter at his office. The woman had tracked him down to tell him that his words had stopped her from giving up on a dream she'd been ready to abandon. She was now successfully pursuing that dream and wanted him to know that his 30 seconds of courage had changed her life. Michael had no idea he was delivering a divine message that day. He was simply responding to a prompting to show kindness to a stranger. But God used those simple words to redirect an entire life. While divine encounters with strangers are spiritual phenomena, there are also psychological and neurological explanations for why these interactions are so powerful and memorable. Understanding the science behind these experiences doesn't diminish their spiritual significance. It actually enhances our appreciation for how God designed our brains and hearts to receive and deliver His messages. The vulnerability factor. Research shows that we're most open to new information and perspective changes when we're in states of emotional vulnerability or uncertainty. This explains why divine messages through strangers often come during our most difficult seasons. Our psychological barriers are lowered, making us more receptive to truth and comfort. Mirror neurons and empathy. Our brains contain specialized cells called mirror neurons that help us understand and empathize with others' emotions. When a stranger shows us genuine care or speaks words of encouragement, these neurons activate, creating a deep sense of connection and understanding that can feel almost mystical. The elaboration likelihood model. This psychological principle explains why messages from strangers can be so persuasive. When we're emotionally involved in a situation, like during a personal crisis, we're more likely to accept and internalize messages that come from unexpected sources, especially when those sources have no obvious agenda. Oxytocin and human connection, even brief positive interactions with strangers, trigger the release of oxytocin, often called the love hormone. This neurochemical creates feelings of trust, bonding, and well-being, which explains why words from caring strangers can have such a profound emotional impact. The availability heuristic. Our brains give more weight to vivid, memorable experiences. Divine encounters with strangers are often so unexpected and emotionally charged that they become deeply embedded in our memory, continuing to influence our thoughts and decisions long after they occur. Synchronicity and pattern recognition. The human brain is designed to notice patterns and meaningful coincidences. When a stranger's words perfectly match our internal struggles or prayers, our pattern recognition systems identify this as significant, creating a powerful sense of meaning and connection. The confirmation bias factor. While confirmation bias usually refers to seeking information that confirms existing beliefs, in the case of divine encounters, it works positively. When we're desperately seeking hope, encouragement, or direction, our brains are primed to recognize and accept messages that provide these things, especially from unexpected sources. Neuroplasticity and transformation. Powerful emotional experiences like receiving an unexpected message of hope during a dark time can actually rewire our neural pathways. This explains why divine encounters often mark turning points in people's lives. They literally change the structure of our brains in ways that support new patterns of thinking and behavior. This scientific understanding doesn't reduce divine encounters to mere brain chemistry. Instead, it reveals how magnificently God has designed our minds and hearts to receive His love and guidance, even through the most ordinary circumstances and the most unlikely messengers. If you want to experience more divine communications through strangers, there are practical steps you can take to position yourself for these sacred interactions. While you can't force divine encounters to happen, you can create conditions that make them more likely. Practice presence. Most people move through their daily lives on autopilot, focused on their phones, their thoughts, or their destinations. To receive messages from divine messengers, you need to be present and aware of the people around you. Put down your phone occasionally. Make eye contact. Be available for the spontaneous conversations that can change your life. Cultivate openness. Approach interactions with strangers without prejudgment. The person God wants to use as his messenger might not look like what you expect. It could be a child, an elderly person, someone from a different cultural background, or someone whose appearance initially puts you off. Divine messengers come in all forms. Slow down. Rushing through life makes it nearly impossible to recognize divine appointments. When you're constantly hurried, you miss the subtle cues and opportunities for meaningful connection. Build margin into your schedule that allows for unexpected encounters. Choose public spaces mindfully. While divine encounters can happen anywhere, certain environments seem to facilitate them more than others. Coffee shops, parks, public transportation, waiting rooms, and other places where people naturally gather create opportunities for meaningful interactions with strangers. Express vulnerability appropriately. This doesn't mean oversharing your problems with everyone you meet, but being genuine about your humanity creates space for others to respond with care and encouragement. When someone asks how you're doing, occasionally give an honest answer instead of an automatic "fine." Develop spiritual sensitivity. Regular prayer, meditation, or spiritual practice increases your ability to recognize when God is orchestrating encounters. The more connected you are to divine communication in general, the more likely you are to recognize it when it comes through strangers. Be someone worth talking to. If you want to receive encouragement from strangers, be someone who encourages strangers. If you want to receive hope, be someone who offers hope. The energy you put out into the world often determines the kind of interactions you attract. Trust your intuition. When you feel drawn to speak to someone, or when someone's words particularly impact you, pay attention to those feelings. Your intuition is often God's way of highlighting significant moments that you might otherwise dismiss. As we reach the end of this message, I want you to understand something profound. The encounter I described at the beginning, that woman in the grocery store who spoke hope into my darkness, wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of an ongoing flow of divine communication that's available to all of us, all the time. God is constantly speaking through strangers. Right now, as you're listening to these words, someone somewhere is being used as his messenger to deliver exactly what another person needs to hear. And at some point today, this week, or this month, you're going to have the opportunity to be part of that network yourself. The question isn't whether God speaks through strangers. The question is whether you're listening, whether you're available, and whether you're willing to be used as his voice in someone else's life. I want to challenge you to live differently after hearing this message. When you're out in the world, be present. Notice the people around you. Listen not just with your ears, but with your spirit. When someone says something that resonates with your soul, don't dismiss it as coincidence. Recognize it as a love letter from heaven, delivered by a messenger who may not even realize they're working for God. And when you feel prompted to speak encouragement to a stranger, don't let fear or embarrassment stop you. You might be the angel someone has been praying for. You might be carrying the exact words that will change the trajectory of their life. The woman in the grocery store was right. Everything I was going through did make sense eventually. The season of darkness led to a period of growth and purpose I never could have imagined. But her words didn't just predict my future. They helped create it by giving me the strength to keep going when I wanted to give up. That's the power of divine messages through strangers. They don't just comfort us in our current circumstances. They actually participate in transforming those circumstances by changing how we see ourselves, our situations, and our possibilities. Your story isn't finished. Your struggles have meaning. Your future is brighter than your current circumstances suggest. And sometimes, the person who will remind you of these truths is a stranger in a grocery store, on a bus, in a coffee shop, or walking down your street. Stay open. Stay listening. Stay available. Because God is speaking, and His favorite messengers might be the people you least expect to hear from. The next time a stranger says something that touches your heart, remember this message. Remember that you're part of an invisible network of divine love that spans the globe, connecting souls who need to hear from heaven with messengers who are willing to speak truth, hope, and encouragement to people they'll never see again. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's love in action. That's God using ordinary people to deliver extraordinary messages to hearts that desperately need to know they're not forgotten, not alone, and not without hope. Listen for His voice. It's closer than you think.